The reunion should have been the end of our story, but it was actually just the beginning of a relationship that would challenge everything the scientific community believed about interspecies communication and trust. The lioness whose eyes had spoken to me so clearly that first morning had apparently decided that our bond was permanent. What happened over the following months proved that some connections transcend single moments of crisis and grow into something that changes both lives forever. 3 days after the reunion, I was conducting routine observations when I spotted familiar movement in the distance. It was her again, the same lioness with the distinctive rosette pattern above her left shoulder. But this time she wasn't carrying a sick cub. She was leading her healthy son, who was now thriving under her care. They approached to within 15 meters of my station, and then something extraordinary happened. The lioness lay down and began grooming her cub while maintaining eye contact with me. She was showing me her child. She was demonstrating that the cub I had helped save was healthy and strong. It was a progress report delivered in the most primal way possible. A mother showing off her thriving offspring to the person who had made his survival possible. The cub, now confident and playful, began exploring the area around his mother. At one point, he wandered to within 5 meters of my position and showed no fear whatsoever. This was unprecedented behavior. Wild lion cubs are taught from birth to avoid humans at all costs. But this little one had been handled by humans during his medical treatment, and his mother had clearly communicated that I was safe. Dr. James Okafor from the University of Dar es Salaam arrived to investigate reports of unusual lion behavior at my research station. He was initially convinced that I was anthropomorphizing normal animal interactions, but after witnessing the lioness's behavior firsthand, he became one of the most vocal advocates for recognizing the complex emotional and intellectual capabilities of wild predators. The breakthrough came when we installed motion-activated cameras around my research station. The footage revealed that the lioness was visiting my compound regularly, even when I wasn't there. She would approach the building, sniff around the entrance, and then position herself in the exact spot where she had first placed her dying cub. She was maintaining a connection to the place where her child's life had been saved. But the most incredible discovery came 6 weeks after our initial encounter. I was reviewing camera footage when I noticed something that made me call Dr. Okafor immediately. The lioness had been bringing other lions to my research station. She was leading them to the spot where I had treated her cub and then positioning herself as if she was telling them a story. She was sharing her experience with other members of the lion community. The implications were staggering. We were witnessing the transmission of cultural knowledge in real time. The lioness was teaching other lions that humans could be allies rather than threats. She was passing down information about seeking help across species boundaries. She was creating a new behavioral pattern that could be learned and shared throughout the population. The validation came 2 months later when another lioness approached my research station, following the exact same protocol. She carried a sick cub to within 20 meters of my building, placed the baby on the ground, and then backed away while maintaining eye contact. The behavior had been learned and replicated. The original lioness had successfully taught another mother how to seek human medical assistance. I treated the second cub with the same care I had shown the first. The little female responded well to antibiotics and supportive care. But what happened during her recovery period was even more remarkable than the original encounter. Both lionesses took up residence around my research station. They were cooperating in the protection of the sick cub, creating an unprecedented alliance between members of different prides. Dr. Okafor documented everything with professional equipment, and his footage became crucial evidence for the scientific community. We were recording the evolution of a new form of interspecies cooperation that challenged fundamental assumptions about animal intelligence and social learning. The lioness whose eyes had first spoken to me had become the founder of a new tradition. In Lion Society. Over the next year, I treated 12 more lion cubs, all brought to me by various members of the local population. Each case followed the same protocol that the original lioness had established. Approach with the sick cub, place the patient at a respectful distance, make eye contact, and wait for assistance. They had developed a standardized procedure for seeking human medical help, but the most meaningful development was the ongoing relationship with the lioness who had started it all. She continued to visit my research station, regularly bringing her now adolescent son to maintain the bond we had formed. These weren't medical visits. They were social calls. She was treating me as an honorary member of her extended family. The young cub I had saved grew into a magnificent juvenile who showed no fear of humans. He would approach my research station with complete confidence, often playing in the area, while his mother rested in the shade. I was witnessing the development of a new generation of lions who viewed humans as potential allies rather than automatic threats. The scientific community took notice when Dr. Okafor published our findings in the journal Animal Cognition. Researchers from around the world came to study what became known as the Rodriguez Protocol. We were documenting behavioral evolution in real time, showing how individual experiences could become cultural. Knowledge passed down through generations. The story reached international attention when National Geographic featured our work in a documentary called The Lioness Who Asked for Help. The footage of that first encounter, when the lioness's eyes had spoken to me, so clearly became one of the most viewed wildlife videos in internet history. But for me, the real significance wasn't the fame or recognition. It was the daily reminder that communication transcends language when the need is desperate enough. The breakthrough moment came when the original lioness brought her son back to my research station as a young adult. But this time, he wasn't alone. He had brought his own mate and their newborn cubs. 3 generations of lions had learned to trust humans for medical assistance. The behavior that had started with one mother's desperate plea had become a family tradition. The young male approached my station with the same confidence his mother had eventually developed. He didn't have a sick cub to present, but he wanted to introduce his family to the human who had saved his life. I watched 3 generations of lions interact with complete trust in human presence and realized we had witnessed something unprecedented in the history of human-animal relationships. Today, 3 years after a lioness's eyes said, "Please help him," so clearly that I broke every rule to carry her cub inside my research station, has become a recognized wildlife sanctuary. The Tanzania Wildlife Authority has provided official support and funding for proper medical equipment and veterinary supplies. What started as one desperate mother's silent plea has grown into a model for conservation through cooperation. The original lioness is now a grandmother, and her extended family includes over 15 lions across 3 generations, all of whom view me as a trusted protector. When I see her approaching my station with that familiar, confident stride, I'm reminded of how far we've come from that first morning when she placed her dying cub between us and asked me to be brave enough to help. The trust she showed me that day wasn't just about saving one cub. It was about opening a door between 2 worlds and proving that love, desperation, and hope are universal languages that every parent understands, regardless of species. Her eyes spoke to me more clearly than words ever could, and in responding to that silent plea, I discovered that sometimes the most important conversations happen without a single sound being made. Every morning when I arrive at my research station, I scan the horizon hoping to see that familiar silhouette approaching with confident strides, because I know that each visit represents another opportunity to strengthen the incredible bond we've built together. A bond that started with a mother's desperate eyes saying, "Please help him," and has grown into something that's redefining what's possible between humans and the magnificent predators who share our world. The lioness who spoke to me without words taught me that communication is about more than language. It's about recognition, understanding, and the willingness to take risks for the sake of love. Her silent plea changed both of our lives forever and created a legacy that continues to grow stronger with each passing day. She showed me that sometimes the most profound messages are delivered not through sound, but through the desperate hope in a mother's eyes. I've been a wildlife conservationist in Tanzania's Serengeti for 11 years, and I thought I understood the boundaries between human and animal until the day a lioness spoke to me without making a sound. What I'm about to tell you will challenge everything you believe about animal communication and the lengths a mother will go to save her child. My name is Dr. Emma Rodriguez, and this is the story of how breaking every safety protocol I had ever learned became the most important decision of my career. It was April 22nd, 2024, around 7:15 a.m., when I first saw her approaching my research station. I was cataloging behavioral data when movement in my peripheral vision caught my attention. A lioness was walking directly toward my compound, but something about her approach was different from any predator behavior I had observed in over a decade of fieldwork. She wasn't hunting. She wasn't territorial. She was walking with the deliberate pace of someone who had somewhere important to be. As she got closer, I could see she was carrying something small in her mouth. My first instinct was to retreat to the safety of my observation tower, but something about her body language made me pause. Her ears weren't pinned back in aggression. Her tail wasn't lashing with predatory intent. Instead, she moved with what I can only describe as careful determination, like she was carrying something precious and fragile. The lioness stopped exactly 20 meters from my station and gently placed her burden on the ground. It was a cub, a tiny male, maybe 8 weeks old, and even from a distance I could see he was in severe distress. His breathing was rapid and shallow, his little body was limp with fever, and there were visible wounds on his small frame. This wasn't a healthy cub being relocated. This was a dying baby, and his mother was running out of options. What happened next defied every protocol I had been trained to follow. The lioness looked directly at me and held my gaze. In 11 years of studying African wildlife, I had never experienced such intense eye contact with a wild predator. But this wasn't the cold, calculating stare of a hunter. This was communication. Pure, desperate communication from a mother who had exhausted every natural option for saving her child. Her eyes were extraordinary. Golden brown with flecks of amber that seemed to catch and hold the morning light. But it wasn't their beauty that stopped me cold. It was the intelligence behind them. The unmistakable awareness that she was looking at another thinking being who might be able to help. She was studying my face, reading my expressions, trying to determine if I was worthy of her trust. Stood frozen 20 meters away from a 350-pound apex predator who was asking me for help. Every safety protocol I had ever learned was screaming at me to retreat, to call for backup, to maintain the boundaries between human and wild animal that keep both species safe. But those eyes, those impossibly expressive eyes, were telling me a story that transcended species barriers. The lioness took one step toward me and then stopped. She was testing my reaction, gauging whether I would flee or stand my ground. When I didn't move, she took another step, then another. With each movement forward, she paused to assess my body language, my facial expressions, my willingness to engage with her desperate situation. She was reading me like a book written in a language older than words. At 10 meters, she stopped and did something that made my heart skip a beat. She picked up her cub, walked 3 more steps in my direction, and then gently placed him on the ground between us. She had closed the distance to 7 meters, close enough that I could see every detail of her magnificent face, close enough that I could see the tears forming in the corners of her eyes. Yes, tears. Actual moisture gathering in the eyes of a wild lioness as she looked at her dying cub and then back at me. The scientific part of my brain was cataloging this unprecedented display of emotion, while the human part of my heart was breaking for this desperate mother. She was crying. A wild predator was showing vulnerability and grief in front of a human because her maternal instincts were stronger than. Her survival programming docked the lioness backed away 3 steps and then did something even more extraordinary. She lay down. A wild apex predator made herself completely vulnerable in front of a human. She was showing me that she trusted me with her life, and more importantly, with the life of her child. She was surrendering her natural advantages and putting herself at my mercy because she had identified me as her last hope. I looked down at the cub lying motionless between us. His tiny chest was rising and falling in rapid, distressed breaths. His eyes were glazed with fever and pain. The wounds on his legs were clearly infected, probably from a hyena attack that had gone wrong. Without immediate medical intervention, he would be dead within hours. But treating a wild lion cub while its mother watched went against every safety protocol in the conservationist handbook. The lioness made a soft vocalization, not a roar or a growl, but something almost like a whimper. She was talking to me. A wild lioness was trying to communicate with a human about her dying child. The sound was heartbreaking. It was the universal language of a mother in distress, asking for help from anyone who might be able to provide it. I looked into her eyes again and saw something that changed everything. It wasn't just desperation or grief. It was hope. This magnificent creature had somehow determined that I was different from other humans, that I cared about her kind, that I might be willing to risk everything to save her baby. She was asking me to be brave enough to break the rules for the sake of love. The moments stretched between us like a bridge spanning 2 worlds. On one side was everything I had been taught about maintaining safe distances from wild predators. On the other side was a dying cub and a mother whose eyes were saying, "Please help him," with more clarity than any spoken words could convey. I made a decision that could have cost me my career or my life. I walked toward the cub. The lioness watched every step but showed no signs of aggression. When I knelt beside her baby, she made that soft whimpering sound again. She was encouraging me. A wild lioness was giving me permission to touch her most precious possession. I gently lifted the tiny cub and felt his burning fever through his soft fur. He was so small, so fragile, so close to death. I looked up at the lioness and spoke softly. I explained that I needed to take her cub inside to treat his injuries. I told her it would take time, but that I would do everything in my power to save him. The lioness tilted her massive head as if she was listening to every word. When I stood up with her cub, she made a sound I had never heard from a lion before. It was soft and questioning, like she was asking if I really could perform the miracle she needed. Breaking every protocol I had ever been taught, I carried the dying cub into my research station. The lioness followed me to the door, but didn't try to enter. She positioned herself directly outside, where she could see through the windows, and began her vigil. She was trusting me with her child, but she wasn't going to let him out of her sight. Inside my station, I worked frantically to stabilize the cub. I cleaned his infected wounds, applied antibiotic ointment, and used heating pads to raise his dangerously low body temperature. I had emergency medical supplies for treating injured researchers, but adapting them for a lion cub required improvisation and prayer. Through my window, I could see the lioness hadn't moved. She was watching my every movement, making sure I was helping, not harming, her baby. The next 12 hours were the longest of my life. The cub's condition was critical, and there were moments when I thought I was going to lose him. His fever spiked dangerously high, and his breathing became so labored that I feared his tiny lungs might give out. But this little fighter had inherited his mother's determination. Slowly, gradually, he began to respond to treatment. Out around midnight, his fever finally broke. His breathing became less labored, and he opened his eyes for the first time since his arrival. The relief I felt was overwhelming, but I knew the real test was yet to come. Would the lioness accept a cub that had been handled extensively by a human? Would she trust that I had helped rather than harmed her precious child? I stepped outside to update the lioness on her cub's progress. She immediately stood up and approached to within 2 meters of me. I could see the desperate hope in her eyes the way she searched my face for any sign of good news. I held up the cub so she could see her baby was alive and alert. The lioness made a sound that can only be described as a sob of relief. Over the next 4 days, the cub's recovery was remarkable. His appetite returned, his playfulness emerged, and he began to show all the signs of a healthy young lion. But during this entire time, the lioness never left my research station. She had taken up permanent residence outside my door, creating a protective perimeter around the building. She was standing guard, making sure nothing could harm her cub while he recovered. On the 5th morning, I knew it was time for the reunion. The cub was fully recovered and ready to return to the wild. I carried him outside, and the lioness immediately approached. What happened next was one of the most beautiful things I have ever witnessed. The mother began grooming her cub, checking every inch of his tiny body, purring so loudly I could feel the vibrations through the ground. The cub nuzzled into his mother's warmth, completely content and unaware of how close he had come to death.